All right, just waiting notification. Okay, boom. And we live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast. We have an incredible guest with us today, one who's going to give us some amazing information as well as inspiration, and that is none other than our brother from out of Philadelphia, Brother Brando Do. First of all, assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam, sir. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you very much. The honor is mine, sir. So for those who don't know, I saw you on Facebook, and when I got the friend request, I was like, let me see who his brother is. Went through the pictures, saw you at Saviours Day, see all the positive stuff you do in the community. How did you first hear the teachings? When did you first hear the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
Yes, sir. So it goes back several years. To make a long story short, I grew up without a knowledge of self in Philadelphia. I'm Vietnamese American. And, you just grow up like any other person coming from the background of someone who is new to America. And, generally what immigrants are conditioned to do is turn their back on their own heritage and really, look up to and try to emulate and adopt the standards of Western civilization, which require you to go against everything that your ancestors and your people and your rich traditions have stood for. So I always looked, for inspiration in many places. And I always, at least, during my teenage years, knew of Muhammad Ali and his courageous stance against the Vietnam War. So I was always curious. But I think it was in 2014, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I would say that was my first introduction, albeit indirectly, to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I was inspired more so of the story of transformation of Malcolm X, but I didn't know too much about the Nation of Islam. Furthermore, there's just so much propaganda, out there, especially when it comes to Malcolm X, as the ruling class have used him against the Nation of Islam in many ways. But it was also in 2004 when I became a student at Temple University in North Philadelphia. And I met this revolutionary activist, scholar, professor, Dr. Anthony Montero. And he actually introduced me to the Black liberation struggle in a way that I never felt or I never knew before, in the sense that this is not just something to study as a part of history and it's all in the past, but it's good to know. It wasn't like that. It was more so, no, we can inherit the legacy. We can inherit the tradition of these great struggles. And throughout the years, he is the founder of the Saturday Free School. We would have these dialogues at the Church of the Advocate in North Philadelphia. And it would be like a roundtable dialogue of, scholars, grassroots activists, student activists, community members. And a lot of these community members would actually be current or former members of the Nation of Islam. And I remember, because it's open to the public, these discussions, that there would be people coming in when we would be talking about Muhammad Ali or the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And they would always try to come and say, like, who, that thing of like, who is Elijah Muhammad to call himself the prophet or the messenger? Who is he to call himself that? And Dr. Montero would always stand up to him and be like, who are you to even ask that question? And he would always stand up for the Nation of Islam and defend the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so in the mind of a young Asian American male, this really destigmatized the Nation of Islam. Because you know what it is when you look up the Nation of Islam or Minister Farrakhan on Google, what's the first few things that pop up? And to anybody that doesn't know better, it can confuse them. I mean, that's what it's meant to do. So, you know, with that being said, being in the Saturday Free School took away that stigma, and it allowed me to want to just know for myself instead of listening to what was being said on social media or, you know, in the New York Times or in other, you know, white media outlets. And I was a part of a coalition called the Black and Brown Coalition at Temple University that was organizing a conference celebrating the life of Dr. Huey P. Newton, co-founder of the Black Panther Party. And we had received on our social media page a message from a brother by the name of Gregory Muhammad, who I later found out was a part of the prison reform ministry in the Delaware Valley region of the Nation of Islam. And, you know, he commended us on the work that we were doing, honoring the life of Dr. Huey P. Newton. And I just felt like this was the moment, you know, right now. Like, you know, I was always curious about the Nation of Islam. I always wanted to learn more. I always loved and respected Muhammad Ali, you know, for standing against the Vietnam War. And I saw him as a hero. And so he messaged us on our organization's social media page, but I went on my personal Facebook page and I messaged him personally. I was like, by the way, that was me that you were talking to on that other page. And I just want to introduce myself. And from then on, we connected, and he was the first person to invite me to the mosque. And I attended Muhammad Mosque number 12 in Philadelphia. And I heard student minister Rodney Muhammad speak for the first time, and I was blown away, man. I was blown away, to say the least. And, you know, he gave an amazing lecture, but I would say one of the things that also left a mark on me was that sense of brotherhood within the mosque. It felt like I had found a family outside of my immediate home. And, you know, when you're searching for the truth, sometimes you lose your biological family and you find a new family. And I think, in a sense, that's what I went through, man. So when I went to the mosque and, you know, I was greeted with such warmth and kindness and generosity, and, you know, building these relationships, especially with Brother Gregory Muhammad, who became like a mentor to me, it really just changed my whole perspective. And from that point on, I just gravitated, you know, towards the Nation of Islam and the brothers, the fruit of Islam, and building these relationships where, you know, I can actually learn from the Black liberation struggle, you know, and that spirit, that courage of determination, and that fighting spirit of never backing down to the greatest enemy of humanity, and always being a conqueror of your circumstance, never being a victim, is something that I get a lot of inspiration from, man. And, you know, I could go on, but it's been beautiful, you know, ever since then, man. So 2017, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And well, all praise due to Allah. And thank you, Brother Brandon, for your amazing testimony. And you're getting love from all across the country. My sister Miriam sends her greetings. Brother Nelson sends her greetings and says, all with love from Massachusetts. And then my sister Miriam says, all praise due to Allah. Wonderful. Okay. So let's go back to your family. So how do you put us in your shoes? How do you explain to your family the theology of the Nation of Islam, like the philosophy of the Nation of Islam? How do you explain that to them? And how do they accept that?
Well, I would say that we have to go back to understanding who the original man is. And that, yes, we are made to believe upon our arrival in this country that before we came to America, we were savages. You know, our people were dictators, communists, and just bloodthirsty murderers. But that's far from the truth. You know, not only that, but our civilizations came before the white man. Um, and in many ways, white civilization has stolen a lot of things, a lot of influences from African and Asian civilization. But I mean, to go back to your question, brother, you know, the original man is the Asiatic black man, maker, owner, cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe. And that in itself, you know, that the Asiatic black man, when I first heard that, I was like, what? Asiatic black man, Asian and black in one, you know, in one term or in one word. And but when you really think about it, bro, you know, we are all one humanity. And the people who have been the murderers, the people who have turned against our people, even people in our communities have been made other than who they really are. And this is the importance of learning from the Nation of Islam, because you psychologically and ideologically separate yourself from the control, that grip of white supremacy, not just the grip of it that controls your physical reality, but that controls your mind. Like once you loosen that grip and you free yourself from those chains of white supremacy, you could learn to think for yourself. You could learn to define yourself on your own terms. And coming from my perspective, um, now when I look at a country like Vietnam, you know, I see heroes, I see freedom fighters, you know, I see courageous and revolutionary men, women, and children, because they all took part in the fight against the US empire. And if it wasn't for the Nation of Islam, I would not have the ability to see my people in that way, because I have to mentally and psychologically separate myself from the ideological influence of white supremacy that took a hold of me at an early age.
Excellent. Okay, Brother Brandon, you're teaching and people are showing you love all across the country. Can't wait to put this on YouTube. Please let us know what city you all are watching. Okay, so Brother Brandon, my next question is, you spoke of Muhammad Ali and his stance against the Vietnam War,
Yes, sir.
right? How important, in 2022, how important is that stance to someone who is Vietnamese?
Well, we are conditioned, and I'm talking about Vietnamese Americans, not Vietnamese people in Vietnam, because that's a whole different category.
Okay.
That's a whole different worldview, because the people, the first wave of Vietnamese immigrants that have fled to America in 1975 were actually on the side of America. And not only that, but when many of them had entered these refugee camps, which they had to stay at temporarily before they entered American society, they were brainwashed, brother. You know, they were taught that the best kind of lifestyle to live is a white suburban middle class lifestyle. They weren't allowed to express their own culture, their own identities. I think even in some refugee camps, you know, it was banned to sing Vietnamese folk songs. You know, and naturally, a part of that, a part of the desire to assimilate into white middle class America is to see Black Americans as your enemy. Okay. And you know, but to also see them as your enemy, Because if you see America or the US government as your savior, then the people who are critical of what the US government is doing to people all over the world, you see them as your enemy or as a threat to your own safety. So it was a lot of brainwashing, bro. But you know, that bold stance by Muhammad Ali when he said, you know, I'm not gonna fly 10,000 miles to Vietnam to kill another Black people. I mean, that's groundbreaking, and it it can challenge and it can shatter the worldview of a young Vietnamese American who was indoctrinated by the ruling class, the white supremacist ruling class of America. And then you can be like, man, like this man took a stance for our people. And it wasn't just words, it was action. But his action wasn't just isolated to himself. He influenced and inspired thousands of other Black Americans, whether they were in the United States or whether they were in the US military, to rebel against the order of the United States telling them, go kill your Vietnamese brother in Vietnam. So when I first heard that, I mean, you know, maybe I didn't know everything at that point. I don't know everything now. Um, but I certainly knew that I was looking at a very brave and a very courageous man. And I certainly knew that he refused to take part in the killing of my people. And that in itself, you know, is very inspiring. And he made the sacrifice to do so. So, you know, you feel special. You feel like you're a part of history. You feel like you're somebody. And, you know, that's what Muhammad Ali did for me. And I hope that it has done and can do for so many other Vietnamese Americans. But, you know, as time went on, brother, I got familiar, not just with Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad Ali's teacher, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I'm sorry for I'm going on a little bit too much, but you know, with Muhammad Ali and you know, other greats, Malcolm X, um, you know, we can't just worship them as if they were aliens or isolated people who were isolated or just became that way just because they were so great as individuals. Because in doing so, we would cheat ourselves, we would betray ourselves out of tapping into that resource, that source of strength that they had. So I can only say that, you know, me um, becoming closer with my family in the Nation of Islam, I was able to learn the teachings, you know, from the FOI and just see how they operate. And after the past, you know, several years, and especially going to Saviours Day, I was like, man, I get it now. I get why Muhammad Ali was so strong and he didn't back down, not even 1 inch. And that's because, man, the teachings. So it's the teachings that you know, I hope to bring, man, to my community, because we need that. We sorely need that bravery. We sorely need that self-love and that spirit of resistance.
Excellent, excellent. You teaching, sir. And shout out to Brother Brandon. And shout out to everybody who continues to like, share, subscribe to the People's Podcast. Let's go to Saviours Day. What what was the deciding factor in getting you to go to Saviours Day, and how was your experience?
Well, last year, I think in the fall, um, you know, Brother Gregory and I have been keeping in touch over the past several years, and you know, we had kept in touch, in short. And you know, one day we were talking, and he just he invited me to Saviours Day. He was like, brother, you know, like the invitation is open. You know, I want to send you an invitation to come to Saviours Day this year. And he told me about the Swan Song and Minister Farrakhan's speech that he was gonna give. And it just felt like it was the right time. I really can't explain it, bro. Um, but it just felt like it was our time to go. So, Chanda, my partner, and I, we booked a flight to Chicago. Um, man, and it was such a beautiful and a moving experience. And it's it's just so different from American society in a sense that we were around, being at Mas Mariam, being in the tent, or being in that premises. We were around thousands of people who were upright citizens, who were productive citizens, um, not on drugs, not hypersexualizing themselves, um, not carrying a gun or partaking in violence. We were around thousands of peaceful, upright people. And this is not just rare to one specific community. It's not rare for the Black community to have an environment like that. It's not just rare for the Asian community or even the white community. This is rare for, or special for American society, period. I mean, I'm from Philadelphia, bro, where we have one of the largest uh, drug trafficking intersections in the country, Kensington and Allegheny Avenue. And I think I would say for about a quarter mile, all you see is drug addicts. All you see is drug addicts on, whether it's crack, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's dope. Um, that's what you see down that area. And I just feel like, man, the propaganda against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, um, and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is really just all a bunch of BS to get the American people to not be able to see the value of the Nation of Islam. Because if we were able to use that as a model for American society and overcome that fear that the propaganda imposes upon us and just learn, man, we could really make American society better than it is today, and we could save a lot of lives, man. Yeah, so I
Excellent.
mean, yes, we were just so moved, bro. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, sir. Take your time. We right here with you, and thank you all for everybody who continues to like, share, and subscribe, and people who continue to show our brother Brandon love all across the country. We have a quick 60-second commercial, brother Brandon, and we are coming right back to you. 1 second. Thank you for this is the first interview of the year. Thank you for every like, share, and subscription, and thank you for every sponsorship and donation.
Reach out to him if you need any of those services. Sister Miriam's ABC I Love Me children's book and coloring book, and now Spanish book, all three available on Amazon.com. Sister Naima's Stay on Point Dance Academy, LLC. She teaches ballet virtually to young girls all across the country, right here in the studios of Atlanta, Georgia. Like mediation, squashing the beats throughout the Southwest region, he does a phenomenal job. His wife, Sister Fudia Muhammad's Giving Birth to a God and the Science of Child Rearing. Please make sure you go out and get a copy in the best of fashion. Brother Kenneth's Bow Tie Maker Extraordinaire. He'll ship you bow ties anywhere across the nation. Taj Hollywood's Chemistry 6 episode, a new television series out on YouTube. He's looking for actors and writers. Make sure you support him. Keep It Hood, helping others overcome depression. Also by Taj Hollywood. Brother Aaron's Elevated Places, stress management, real estate, credit, repair, and restoration. His Respect for Life Center, they do personal wellness, philosophy, emotional, and mental spiritual wellness. 229-344-1474. Dr. Henry Carter's King Henry Turkey Legs, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Brother Rashad Muhammad's COVID-19 Disinfected Cleaning Services out of Chicago. Student Minister Sharif Muhammad's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ. available on adulsharif.com. And lastly, Brother Joshua Muhammad's book, Cleopatra, as well as No Father, No Excuse, both available
on Amazon.com. So I want to thank you all. I'm gonna make sure you stop. Thank you for every person who ever subscribed, every person who gets anonymous donations, right back to our brother Brandon. And shout out to Sister Shahidi Kareem. She says, shaking my head. Yes, she knows that area is very sad. Beautiful interview, closing the gap. All right, perfect. Praise be to Allah. Okay, so Brother Brandon, my next question is, speaking of Philly and Philadelphia, you know, from everybody who described it, from Meek to Benny Siegel to Lil Uzi, it seems very crime-ridden. Have you ever been faced with fear? And if so, how have you overcome that fear?
Well, yes, sir. I face fear all the time, man. I mean, it's not necessarily the fear of a gun, but really, I mean, fear of the what ifs in life. You know, what if I'm out here and I'm trying my best to tell the truth and the people don't accept me and things like that. But I don't know how much I could really go into gun violence, but I would say, you know, that's definitely some of the fears that I'm dealing with. But to overcome it, you know, I really think it's just to learn from the example of our great leaders, you know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, unapologetically telling the truth. People like James Baldwin, W.E.B. Du Bois,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Martin Luther King Jr., all of our greats, Ho Chi Minh,
Yes,
all of them have paved the way for us. And it would be a shame, but it will also be a betrayal to not honor their legacies by living our lives in the same example as them, by their example. So, you know, every time I'm feeling fear, man, I think about them and the sacrifices that they made for the greater good of humanity.
excellent. Yes, sir. And thank you for naming all of the greats. And we should follow in their footsteps. Thank you, everyone who continues to show love to the People's Podcast. Okay, so how were you received by the believers, the fellow believers all across the country when you came to the Swan Song? Did everybody show you love? Was everybody being kind to you and stuff?
I mean, I instantly felt like I had found a family. I don't. That's really all I have to say, bro. I mean, you know, and I would say that at a certain period, you know, I was attending the mosque, you know, every few months. But it was really my partner, my wife, Chanda, who, when we went in 2020 to one of the services, man, she just loved it. And I remember at the end, she just looked at me and she was like, "Can we keep going? Can we like come more often?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So that gave me the strength to be like, "All right, we're gonna come more often. You know, let's make it a consistent thing." And from then, I mean, the relationships that we had even prior to that, you know, blossomed even more. And I'm so happy that the experience that I got, I was able to, you know, build on them, build on the relationships and make more relationships. But it was also beautiful that I was able to share that experience with my wife. And now, you know, she has sisters that she can go to for help, the MGT. And, you know, she has a family that she can go to for moral support and strength. And, you know, it's just been another beautiful part, man, of this journey called life, man. I mean, sometimes I'm left speechless, but yeah, I gotta give a shout out to my wife for, you know, really encouraging me. Because sometimes you never know how people are gonna interpret things. You know, I was lucky enough to have the Saturday Free School and Dr. Montero to kind of be that voice in my head that was taking the stigma away from the Nation of Islam. And, you know, he would even talk about how the Zionists are, you know, how the Jewish elite in this country always try to attack the Black liberation struggle, especially after a certain point, 1967, the 6 Day War,
Yes, sir.
when pretty much Jewish American organizations had went full force, following and aligning themselves with the foreign policy of the US government in Israel. And that's how they became white, not just white, but super white and powerful to the point, where they're at today. So he really broke it down for me. And the Saturday Free School gave me that basis, that courage to keep going and keep, being curious and looking for the truth beneath all of the rubble of propaganda. Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Yes, sir. You show love and people saying praise be to Allah. And I can't wait to put this on YouTube. Okay, so I have a question. So there's a lot of members in the Nation of Islam of the Hispanic or Latinx, I don't use the proper term, community that has connected all over, people who speak Spanish, the Spanish speaking community in the nation. Are there other members of the nation, other believers that you could connect with, who may, maybe from Vietnamese background? Have you met any other people?
Yes, sir. There's a boxer in the Midwest. His name is Duan Vu.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's my brother, man. One of the first Asian believers that I spoke to, and we just bonded over so many things, man. I gotta give a shout out also to my brother Odam. He's from Long Beach, California. He's processing, but he's a young Cambodian brother. We found each other through Instagram, and Sister Amina out in Los Angeles,
Yes,
who's
sir.
been doing great work with the student minister out there and the Asian and the Black community, uniting them out there. So, it really makes you feel like, you're not alone. I mean, I already, recognize that I'm part of the family of humanity, and these barriers,
Right.
that have been imposed or put between Black people, Asian people, Latino people, these are all artificial barriers that white supremacy uses to divide us. Because as long as we're fighting against one another, we're going to leave the system, the ruling class of this country, unchallenged and unscathed. But I mean, in the words of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, our unity is more powerful than an atomic weapon.
Yes,
And
sir.
that's what type time I'm on, man. That's what type time we need to be on.
That's right.
And the Nation of Islam serves an example of how to build unity across these color boundaries that have been put between us.
Excellent. Yes, sir. Okay, so Brother Brandon, will you ever go into the ministry?
I thought about it, man. I'm really not sure. I guess the only thing that I could say, bro, is that I'm on a journey. It's an arduous journey, difficult in many ways, beautiful in many ways. But I'm learning so much, man, from every part of it. I'm learning so much, and I can say that whether or not, I decide to become a registered member, that the Nation of Islam and the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad will always be in my heart. It's impossible to separate it because our history is so intertwined, man. Our history, and I want to be able to be a beacon of light, to those who don't know the truth, because it will shock a lot of people that, for example, in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, the greatest newspaper of all time, I mean, Vietnamese revolutionaries, Cambodian revolutionaries, on a weekly basis, man, were featured in that paper. And you got to see the unity that was taking place at that time. Because even if you were a Black man from Alabama, you felt that connection with that Vietnamese or that Cambodian peasant in Southeast Asia, because you were facing a common enemy in the US government. And that the Muhammad Speaks newspaper was a source of that education that broadened people's worldview to make oppressed to make oppressed people understand and know that you are not alone in your struggle. You have allies and you have comrades all over the world, and that the more you stand up to injustice, the more people will stand up with you. So I mean, I just say all that to say, bro, man, I've learned so much from the Nation of Islam, and I hope, to continue to build, the relationships that we're building and continue to learn as a humble student of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Excellent. You teacher, Bro Brandon. And Sister Chanda Rose says, all praise due to Allah. And thank you, everybody who continues to like, share, subscribe to the People's Podcast. Okay. When we message each other on Facebook, you said you watched the People's Podcast. That means a lot to myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast. How did you get introduced to podcast?
Oh man, I mean, I'm late nights on YouTube and searching things, and I think that's how I stumbled upon your podcast, man. And I've seen so many eye-opening and profound interviews, especially the testimonies of the believers. And I realized, man, no matter what background you come from, man, the human experience all has commonalities.
Yes, sir.
We've all come from a place where we had to overcome something, or we were born ignorant without knowledge of self. And our parents, a lot of times, didn't have knowledge of self. So sometimes we even had to stand up to them. We had to stand up to our communities at some other times. But I mean, like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says, man, after difficulty comes ease. And, it's so profound and it's so inspirational to know that I'm not the only one going through these things, man. Because the pressure of this society and the pressure of this, wicked world that we're living in can break the soul of an individual if you don't have a source of strength that's backing you, or a moral foundation. But yeah, I mean, so through listening to your podcast, man, I was able to feel so much closer, to the believers, and realize, man, we're just like each other. But also, I was inspired by so many of the people on your podcast, and honestly, bro, I mean, I'm just here to learn. I'm just here to learn. Because yeah, it's changed my life for the better.
Oh, praise due to Allah. You teach me, Brother Brandon. All right. Our brother Nelson Ramos says, all praise due to Allah. Sister Shahadi Kareem says, that's right. You teaching. So people showing love. And once we put on YouTube tonight, people are going to continue to show love to our brother. All right. Now, this is a question that we ask every guest on the People's Podcast. What type of music do you listen to? And what is your favorite album of all time?
Man, that's a tough one, man. Because I had a lot of phases. I had a lot of phases in my life. When I was in high school, I had a 90s hip hop phase, and I would be listening to A Tribe Called Quest, Jay Dilla.
Okay.
Soul phase, Music Soul Child, Erykah Badu.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, even coming to the Saturday Free School in 2014 and knowing Dr. Anthony Montero, he really connected for us how a certain period of Black music was connected to the struggle and formed by the struggle. For example, the Delphonics.
Yes, sir.
Brother William Hart Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, was an amazing artist, man, a beautiful artist. And the Delphonics have the type of music that awaken like the humanity within yourself.
Absolutely.
People think that to be a revolutionary is just to be, some, abrasive, hardcore, and just, protesting and yelling and holding up signs and things like that, or being dogmatic. But if we are to build a more humane world, we have to do it through humanistic means. And that music of the Delphonics, that music of Marvin Gaye,
Yes,
um,
sir. Yes, sir.
a lot of the music from Motown, the music of Tina Marie, um,
Absolutely.
was all connected in one way or another to the struggle for Black liberation and the unity of all oppressed people in the world. So, I would say that's my base. That's my musical base now. I
Okay.
do dabble a little bit, in mainstream, of course. I try to stay connected, with what the young people are listening to. Because I am a teacher in a public high school, so I try to understand them.
Okay.
But I would say that that R&B, of the 60s, the 70s, and I think up until the 80s, man, that's what drives me spiritually, and that's what helps sustain me, in this struggle.
Wonderful. Yes, sir. I'm glad that you're an educator. Shout out to all the teachers across the country, everybody who's making a profound impact on young people of today. Sister Hagar says, Assalamu alaikum. And she said, Asiatic Black man, all praise due to Allah. Beautiful. And you're going to get so much love on YouTube as well. All right. We have 2 more questions for you, sir. The next question is, here we go. You answer so much. The next question is, what do you do for fun?
I'm kind of boring, bro. I mean, I love researching.
Okay.
I love learning about my history, the truth of it. And the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, I started reading that last year. And since then I've been glued to the archives. Because the more I read, the more I find out that we've been lied to, even more than I realized we've been lied to before that. So it's just like, man, the depths, I mean, the extent that the enemy will go to keep us dumb and ignorant, so that they remain in power, man, is endless. Lately I've been researching about the Khmer Rouge genocide and how the Western countries were involved in that genocide in Cambodia. And I also like to write essays every now and then. Really, really not because as a hobby or anything, but because I think I've gotten to the point where I realized that with all my mistakes and all that, I still have to use my life and the things that I've learned as a vehicle to educate the youth, no matter what background they come from. So, a lot of the things that I'm learning, the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, I've written about a lot of things I've learned about the anti-colonial histories of Africa and Asia and Latin America. I've written about, and these are all things that I've learned from my experiences, with the believers, and also my experiences in the Saturday Free School, because I've learned a lot, from both. So yeah, I mean, that's what gives me joy, man. Just being able to have that opportunity to spread knowledge, because I know that there is somebody out there who's like a little me, just a young Asian American, or a person of any background, man, just looking for a way out, looking for the truth, but the truth hasn't been introduced to them yet, and they're just waiting for that light to enter their life. So I mean, God willing, man, I can play a positive role in the life of a young person, in that way. Because I know once you hear the truth, especially about yourself and your people and the way that the world is, it'll change your life. You know, it'll open so many doors for you to define yourself on your own terms. And that's all I want, man. You know, if yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And my sister Naima is agreeing. Thank you, Naima. Thank you, everyone who continues to watch and show love to people's podcast. Our last two questions for our brother, Brandon. Do you ever want to travel and visit, or I don't know if you already have, but go to Vietnam to feel the connection, to actually go back to visit there? Is that something that's on your bucket list?
Yes, sir. Well, in 2020, I had the privilege to visit Vietnam and Cambodia. I stayed there for a month, and you know that in itself was an experience that changed my whole perspective, because I did go there in 2008 when I was probably about 14 years old, but I was coming in with a tourist lens. I didn't really know the things that I knew in 2020. I wasn't educated on the anti-colonial history of Vietnam, and you know how just the courage that the people had in defeating the U.S. empire. But I came there in 2020 with a new lens, and it was a beautiful experience, bro. You know, here you are in a country that prides itself on defeating the United States. Um, if you walk around the capital, Hanoi, you will see planes and helicopters that were shot down by the North Vietnamese, and they're U.S. planes, and and they pride themselves off that, you know. And just to put things in perspective, the Vietnamese American community is very different from Vietnamese people in Vietnam. You know, we're taught to hold our heads in shame. We're taught that the freedom fighters of Vietnam were brutal and bloodthirsty communists, rapists, and things like that. But that's all propaganda, bro. I mean, they are heroes. And I was able to see that, man, because um, they walk with a backbone. You know, they walk with their heads held high. They have a knowledge of self.
Yes,
Um,
sir. Yes, sir.
from the beginning, you know, every child is taught about the great impact of President Ho Chi Minh, you know, who traveled the world, you know, throughout Asia, Africa, Latin America, and he spent time in Harlem during the Renaissance. And I think probably, you know, knew a lot of the people at that time, like Langston Hughes. So he formed a specific worldview and instilled it into the Vietnamese people that allowed them to see the commonality between themselves and other dark and oppressed people throughout the world. And I just remember being in a community meeting one time, and you know, my uncle was kind of like my tour guide in my family's village. And he would kind of bring me around, showing me off, because you know, like, I mean, the when you have an American, like, you do carry like some prestige in a third world country. They like showing you off. But they were like, my uncle was like to these people, I think they were in the Communist Party. He said, you know, this is my nephew. He's Vietnamese American, but he likes Ho Chi Minh. And they were already like, wow, because we were Vietnamese Americans, the whole world knows, or the Vietnamese diaspora knows, that Vietnamese Americans despise him. You know, they were conditioned to do so, you know, by the US government. But someone had looked over to me, and I don't know why he said it, but he said that Ho Chi Minh didn't have his own family. He didn't have a wife. He didn't have his own children. But that's because the children of Vietnam, all of the children were his family. And that's why he waged the anti-imperialist struggle against America. And I responded, I was like, well, you know, don't you think that he also saw the children of all of humanity in Asia and Africa, all of the world as his family? And he was like, yes, yes. And, so that was something that was really groundbreaking for me, man. And one of the things that I told Brother Gregory Muhammad is that over there, I realized that Vietnamese people and Black Americans, especially the fruit of Islam and the MGT, bear so much civilizational resemblance to one another. I mean, the generosity, the respect. In the Vietnamese language, there's no word for you. There is a word, but if you use it, it's considered rude. Everybody calls them each other brother or sister, just like the leaders do. And just, that politeness of, always, doing a little bow when you greet your elders and always acknowledging them and things like that, man, it reminded me exactly of the mosque. And so many people had welcomed me into their households, poured me tea and just wanted to get to know me. And it was exactly what Brother Gregory Muhammad had did, for me. Welcome me into the mosque, welcome me into his home, and just that spirit of selflessness, that spirit of revolutionary generosity is something that is common among all of the original people of the earth. That's what I learned. And the spirit of standing up to your oppressor. Never back down. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Teacher, Brother Brandon. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody who's watching. And Sister Sherry Pearl says, "All praise to Allah." I think this is her first time ever watching live, but assalamu alaikum, ma'am. All right, now, Brother Brandon, our last question that we have for you, sir. What would you like your legacy to be, sir?
I would like to be remembered as someone who always stood for the truth. And I've been thinking about this, with the New Year's and everything, just reflecting on life. And many times our journey has a lot of bumps along the way. It's not a straight path, and it definitely wasn't for me. When I first got knowledge of self, and knowledge of the greatness, of my heritage, I felt lied to. And in many ways that manifested itself in a deep anger. And I didn't know who to take it out on, or how to turn it into something productive. So I was very zealous, man. So in my first several years of, knowing myself, or beginning to know myself, you just feel like debating everybody, you feel like proving everybody wrong. I was a little bit crazy, man. I still am crazy a little bit, but I'm working on it. But I would say, to every young person, man, who wants to discover who they are, just start with learning the truth. And once you learn the truth, just start by telling it. We will develop our methodologies, our pedagogies, and our strategies along the way. That's part of the growth process. And sometimes it is a process of trial and error and making a mistake, and then being able to go back and self-examine and be like, man, maybe I could have did that another way. Maybe I could have been more patient with that person and waited until the right moment to give them the knowledge that I wanted to pass on to them. But that's just me, thinking about how can I better examine myself so that I can become a more complete human being and a better deliverer of truth. But I mean, yeah, to answer your question, bro, I just want to be remembered as someone who was honest and someone who told the truth.
All praise due to Allah. And thank you, Brother Brandon. And Chanda Ross says, the most honorable Mrs. Farrakhan said, quote, I cannot live without the truth, end quote, and then heart. So showing love. I want to thank everybody who's been watching on Facebook. Can't wait to put this on YouTube. And I want to thank you, Brother Brandon, for your kind Spirit, I hope to see you in person, inshallah, soon. I gotta get to Philly. So we can connect and do lunch or something, because I really want to learn from you and continue to root for you in any other way, that you need support or love. I'm here, my family's here, the viewing audience of the People's Podcast is here. You've been a great guest, sir. This is Joshua Leonard Muhammad signing off of the People's Podcast. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam, brother Joshua.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching.